So now I'd like to start talking about foreign keys and the purpose of foreign keys in the design of our database. And first of all, to do that, I'm actually going to utilize the database diagrams from within SQL Management Studio. So I'm going to click on this database diagrams folder underneath my DB2 library database, and it's going to ask me if I want to bring in the supporting objects required for database diagrams. I'm going to choose yes. And what that just does is it allows me to then create diagrams. So I can right click here, or I can right click on database diagrams, and I can choose new database diagram, and that will then it'll basically ask me what tables do I want to bring into my diagram. I'm just going to grab all of them and hit add, and it's going to bring all of them in and kind of just throw them around. So let me kind of organize these at least a little closer to what they should actually be, and you'll see why in just a minute. So we'll bring this over here, and we'll have loaners. Let's actually go here. Books, book loaners. Books have authors, and branches have books. Alright, so that should allow us to see everything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this as diagram 1 for module 6. So the idea here that I want to kind of talk about is foreign keys, and why are foreign keys and primary keys and the concept of normalizing your database all important. And they're all kind of related topics. So let's kind of start with normalization. Normalization is a process in which you work to try to basically make your database as lean and consistent and provide as much data integrity as possible. Now there's 6 or 7 normal forms that you go off of in terms of database design, and there's actually the nth form. So depending on who you talk to and how they look at it, these forms can technically be infinite. And when you go to that nth degree, that theoretical limit, the idea is that you have no duplication of any data in your database, and that everything is represented by one field and one field only. Now, again, that's a theoretical limit, and it doesn't really exist. But the idea here, or the absolute that you should try to aim for, is that you don't want to have data duplicated all over the place inside of your database. If and when possible, if you have data that is relational in some way, and if you want to focus for a moment, we can talk about books and authors specifically. As we said in earlier modules, that books and authors have a relationship. You can have multiple books written by the same author. You can have multiple authors as part of one book. And there is that kind of relationship. Now, for us to go in and put all of the author details on every book record is redundant, because if you have the same author writing 5 books, then you have to put that author's first and last name down every time, and you have to ensure, just for lookups and things like that, consistency as in that their first name and last name are typed the exact same way, so that way when you search for Robert as the first name of the author, that it comes up, and that it's not Robert on some, Rob on others, Bob on some books. You want to have that consistency, that every book that's authored by Robert has Robert as the first name. And to do that, you work to try to achieve having one record for that author, and that record or row lives in the authors table. And then that row is associated using what's called a foreign key, linking the books by that author to the author itself to that table. So here's what I mean by that. So we have the authors table here, and we have an ID. So we want to link that ID to the author underscore ID field. Now, we got a bunch of dialogues that popped up here asking about building these foreign key relationships. And what we're doing here is we are establishing in the database the actual schema and logic to say that we want to build a strong or constrained relationship between these two tables. Now, we'll talk more about these pop-ups and what they mean in another module. So for now, I just want to hit OK and OK. And what I really want to focus on is the line that was drawn here, and just making sure that it makes sense. That the idea here is that by having an author underscore ID column in books, that column points to the author's table, and the way that I prefer to build them is that it's table underscore column, so that I know that this is a foreign key. If there's an author table or an authors table in my database, then this foreign key points to that table. And likewise, if there's an ID column in that table, this foreign key relates back to that ID column. So by simply just doing a select statement and looking at the column names, being able to associate this column references this table is a really good thing and helps make your database design more readable, more usable. It ensures better consistency in the data that's being, stored and utilized within the database and things of that nature. So that is kind of the overarching idea there, is that we're working to normalize our data to reduce duplication, and then by doing that, we then have to utilize foreign keys to relate the data back together. So that's just a very small example of that. We're going to dig more into it in the next video, but just kind of hold on to those two concepts of reducing duplication of data and looking at ways to accomplish that, and then at the same time relating that data back to each other.